let's start at the beginning, shall we? First of all, you have a big concert coming up here at Rivers Casino in Des Plaines on September 15th. And I know that you've spent tons of time here in Chicago. Obviously, you've played here a bunch. So how does it feel to be coming back to Chicagoland?
It's like they don't call it the heartland for anything. I always look at you have on one coast you have New York City, and then you have Los Angeles, and Chicago is always like the mid ground. It's like you're right in the middle of the whole thing. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? It has that identity. To me, it does. I'm an
right,
East Coast person, so when you get there, you're right in the middle of the country, right in the heart of the whole thing. Is that
right.
true? I don't know.
It
Windy City.
absolutely is, and obviously, home of the blues, and really to listen to your music is to kind of take a lesson in the blues and that early kind of boogie rock that's like foundational to the whole rock and roll thing. So I would imagine that Chicago must hold some kind of a special place for you.
Well, when I first went and visited 2120 South Michigan Avenue in 1981, that was like a shrine to me. And I was really shocked because it was all boarded up. It was all like, like those kind of things they put up in the cities when they close up so they don't want to get robbed, those
Yeah.
fence kind of things and it was all boarded up and I couldn't get in. I said, this is where Johnny B. Good was recorded. This is where Roll Over Beethoven was recorded. How
Right.
can it be boarded up like this? And I would talk to people on the street and they didn't even know what I was talking about. And I would be talking to people from Chicago and around Illinois. I said, Chuck Berry cut Memphis, Tennessee here. That's an international, worldwide hit.
Yeah.
And it's boarded up. I don't understand. You got the greatest blues musicians in the world, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, who recorded here. And what's going on? You
Right.
know, I
Right.
would be, I just couldn't fathom this. I was just like, it's like Keith Richardson when he first visited 2120 South Michigan Avenue. He went there in '64, and Muddy Waters was outside painting the building.
Think about
And,
that.
and Keith said, he said, "Well, that don't seem right." Well, I had the same reaction,
Hmm.
when I first went there. I said, "Well, you keep the upgate on Wrigley Field, don't you?" You know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. Well, we
So I
still
was
have
lucky enough to come back years later. They reopened it and they made it a museum and
mhm,
a blues museum and all that kind of thing. So,
yeah,
but when I first went there, I was in shock
yeah.
actually
And,
to
and
see
and
that.
I bet that's so true. We are still lucky to have Buddy Guy here and Buddy Guy's Legends, and he's still at it, still going strong. So a living legend, himself too. Um,
You ain't
and
never, you ain't, but Buddy Guy is a long way from throwing in the towel.
a long
Buddy,
way. You
Buddy
got
Guy,
that right.
Buddy Guy is going to live forever, man. That guy, there's no stopping him.
I think so. I think so. And a charming guy too.
He told me once something that blew me away. I said, "Well, what's all this talk about? Only black people can play the blues, white people can't." And he said, "The guitar does not know what color your fingers are."
Wow. I
That's
think it's
badass.
so true.
Man,
Yeah.
that hit me right between the eyes.
That's it. Bullseye hit.
Yeah.
Um, so and you yourself are one bad mofo, a guitar player. So I gotta ask you this. As a person who has played Bad to the Bone on the radio many, many times, myself, and that opening riff on that song, I mean, wow. It jumps out now as much to me when I play that song as it did the first time. And it's one of those iconic riffs. I would put it like, it's like the Stones Start Me Up, Bad to the Bone, George Thorogood. It's so immediate and it means something. It's like, Steppenwolf too, like those kinds of killer riffs. When you wrote that one in particular, did you know right then that you had a little bit of lightning in a bottle?
Um, no. We
No.
were putting the song together and we wanted Muddy Waters to record it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and we were rehearsing it without anybody knowing about it. And we were on this tour, this 50-50 tour. And on date number 44, remember, we only played it in sound checks. We never played it live.
Okay.
and I was getting ready to go on stage. And this gentleman came up to me who I'd never met before and said, "Hi, George, I hear you're writing songs." And I said, "Yeah, actually, I'm getting started with that." And the man said, "Well, if they're anything like Bone, you're going to do all right." I said, "You mean Bad to the Bone?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. If you write like that, you're going to go a long way." Oh, by the way, I'm David Geffen.
Wow. To which you said, "Hello, Mr.
No, I
Geffen."
said,
Okay.
I'm George.
Well, I mean, and it's true. I mean, at that point, probably in the early '80s, right? You had been going since the '70s, and lighting up stages and that whole thing, and then eventually all the radio stuff happened. That must have been a shocking turn for you.
Well, when we first got going and bourbon, scotch, and beer and moving on over hit the radio, we were actually a little upset about that, if you can
Oh,
believe that. We thought, we're not
wow.
supposed to be on the radio. It's not the kind of group we are.
Uh-huh.
Remember, in the in the it was originally called underground radio,
Right, FM.
and then it was the same thing. They called it FM radio.
Mm-hmm.
It became classic rock radio. It's the
Right,
same radio and the same songs.
right,
It's just they changed the name. Then it's Sirius Radio. Then it's but it's the same. It's the same program, the same process. They just call it something different, every 20, 25 years.
right.
Whatever you call it, the songs are the same. Whatever you
They
want
got
to.
to be good ones, though. That's for sure.
Nowadays radio is paid for by advertising, and it's very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So advertising are going to insist on the top of the line songs to be played, so people will listen and buy the products, and it's a business. It wasn't like that in the late '60s or right into the '70s with FM radio. They had album-oriented radio or
Mm-hmm.
album-oriented records,
Right.
which we were, and that was the thing. But as time went on and radio spots got to be more and more expensive, the program director said, "These are the songs we have to play to keep people listening." And we were fortunate to get one or two of them on it.
That's a really interesting and very succinct way to sum up kind of the history of how all that happened. I mean, I actually haven't heard anyone kind of put it boiled down like that to date. And that's something that people struggle to explain sometimes, but that's 100% true. So
Janda, in anything, the bottom line is money.
you got that right.
Loyalty is based on finance.
That's exactly right. But except for your fans who are 100% loyal. I mean, I know people who have seen you play won't miss a show. I'm sure you'll see some repeat faces when you come here on September 15th.
Not enough.
Bring your children too. And
we're very fortunate to have a very loyal and supportive fan base. Very fortunate.
And I wonder, as someone who's been on the road as long as you have, has it changed very much since?
Yes, the roads have gotten better. They're better paved.
Okay. I bet your
The hotels have gotten better.
Yeah.
They have room service and housekeeping and air conditioning.
and back in those days, you were probably doing vans and stuff like that. But I mean,
no, we were sleeping in the van.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it has to be difficult to be a road entity for as long as you have, and some of the members of the Destroyers have been with you all, practically, and even up to the beginning. So that's got to feel like family a little bit.
Well, sometimes I don't know whether to question their loyalty or their sanity.
Great answer. Okay. I like that one. What else do I want to ask the great George Thorogood? And I think I know the answer to this one. If you were to say, okay, this is my preference here, would you say the studio is a fun and more cool thing to do, or do you just really love being on stage live?
Let me ask you something, Janda. Is it better to write a love letter or to make love?
Well, I I guess.
Uh, is it better to send an invitation to a party or to be at the party?
You want to be at the party.
There you go.
100%. 100%. For you, as somebody, I know you have always covered cover songs have always been kind of in your repertoire and in your wheelhouse. I mean, everybody from like Eddie Cochran to Hank Williams to the blues legends and so on. But when you do write songs, and you mentioned, earlier with Bad to the Bone, is that kind of how it goes? Like you have like a riff or a thought, and then the song happens, or is it something that you sit down and you're like, I'm going to do this?
All of the above things that you say, it works that way. You can't really put your finger. In my case, you might usually in my case, I'll think of a song title first,
right,
and then work around that, or you come up with a riff and then you work around that. Keith Richards had the lick to Satisfaction first,
right,
and then he went to Mick Jagger and said, put some lyrics around this.
So always music first, then lyrics for you.
Not always, but it helps. If you have a lick that catches people, dun 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 dun, right. You can write any lyrics to that because it's catchy. You got it. Dun 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 dun. You don't need any lyrics, but that generally is the safest way to go. Then you can put something around it. Unless you're Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan doesn't even need a band.
He's going to do what he's going to do, I think, right?
He's a genius. I mean, the stuff he writes, man, I mean, it's like, forget it, right. Don't even consider him. Don't even think about it,
Right.
He doesn't need a lick.
Right.
His lyrics are the lick. You know what I mean? His words and his title. That's the riff.
Yeah.
But there's only one Bob Dylan,
That's true. The poet laureate. Speaking of guys like that or other artists, I know you mentioned the Stones too. Is there one particular artist or band that just about on any given day you yourself could pull up and listen to? It always makes you feel good, or always hits you in the right mood.
When was the last time you put on Jumpin' Jack Flash and you didn't turn it up?
Right.
As opposed to turning it off.
Right. The Stones always, their repertoire has so many of those kinds of songs, for you.
No, that song.
That particular song. Okay. Jumpin' Jack Flash.
That's the song. I read an article about Keith Richards did an interview, and they said, name your favorite rock and roll songs. And they said, which one of your favorites? And they thought he would say Johnny Be Good. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Or something else. And he said, well, my favorite rock and roll song is the same as everybody else's. And they said, what? And he said, Jumpin' Jack Flash. And he wasn't being egotistical because he wrote it. He's right. It's the greatest rock and roll song ever, Right. And so the guy was being honest. He said, it gives me a rush. He said, I pick up my guitar and I play it every day. I do too. We all do. It's the greatest karaoke and air guitar song on the planet.
You heard it here first, folks.
No, you're not. Maybe you heard it here first, but it's been said before, and it will be said before.
But you heard it here for that time, anyway.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
Okay. Fair enough. Speaking of like Keith Richards and guys like that, musicians in general, people who have found their way like you to make this thing your life and your career. Do you think it's born in you? Do you think that you are a born musician, or is it something that can come to people? There's a difference, right? Like either you're born in to be a badass boogie woogie rock and roller, or
some things you're born to do, and some things need to be developed. Now, if you're born to do something and you develop and evolve from that, you might have something that catches on. Now, let's face it, Mozart and Michael Jackson were born to do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even know it
till
someone told about it. And then other things have to be evolved. Elvis Presley was born to do what he does.
Mm-hmm.
You think Elvis Presley could be a mailman? With all due respect to the postal department, okay?
No, not hardly.
So there are some things out there that they were this was something, I don't know if I was born with it, but I do know this was something I was meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to develop along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But from the day one, when since I could, walk across the room, I knew this was what I was meant to do.
Right.
But born with an enormous talent of someone, and that's I always say I was meant to do this, but I got to learn how to do it.
Right. Right.
Does that make any sense? Okay.
Absolutely. You had to build those calluses up.
Kind of like Pete Rose.
Yep.
Meant to be a baseball player,
Right.
and then he worked on it from there.
Right. Okay. I agree with that. I think that there's something in some people that you can just tell that it's a comfortable, coat that they're wearing, that gift or that talent, and I think you can tell with performers when you're on stage and how people respond to it and that kind of thing. I think people always can tell the real thing. So
Willie Mays was born with greatness. The rest of us have to work at it.
we're working it at it every day.
Every day.
Every
Janda.
day.
Every day.
Amen. Are there any artists that you're listening to that are, like new rock bands or anything like that that you think are pretty good?
Lady Gaga's pretty talented.
I agree. Honestly, I think she's a rock star, right? She's kind of a rock star.
Star is a star, whether it's rock or not. A star is a
Right.
star. And
I agree.
I had to get halfway. I had to get halfway through the movie watching I love Al Pacino like everybody does,
Mm-hmm.
right? I get halfway through the movie and say, that actress is Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
That's how good. I didn't even know it was her.
Mm-hmm.
And every time, I just discovered a few years ago, it absolutely breaks my heart when I listen to Amy Winehouse. When I
Oh, I
listen
know.
to,
Oh.
for two reasons. I hadn't been that stunned listening to a sound since the first time I heard Robert Johnson or Hank Williams.
Wow.
I had never heard anything like it. And then when I found out she had died a couple years before, I go, what?
Yeah.
I mean, someone wasn't there protecting her,
Yeah.
taking care of her,
Yeah.
making sure, make sure this talent's going to be with us as long as possible.
Right.
So, and it's so brilliant, I can almost not listen to it. And it's so tragic, I can almost not listen to it.
Right.
So you asked me a question. You asked me, I'm telling you. Well, to me, she's still current.
Yes. Well, she's
Anything that's great is going to last.
I think she might have been one of the last, the last of a kind of a line of singer and artist, because she was something special. I completely agree. And what a heartbreaking talent.
I don't even think she was the of some kind of line. She was her own line.
Right.
That's how original she was, her sound.
Right.
There was no comparison. When you have no comparison to something, you're not following in a, like, let's face it, Thorogood followed in the steps of Jay Giles and Peter Wolf, the Gator with the heater, the boss with the hot sauce, making these squeeze and a liver flavor. Everybody knows that. Okay, I followed in the footsteps but Amy was her own, from another universe. So you asked me about current artists.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to answer.
I love that answer, and both of those answers actually, and I couldn't agree more in both cases. Exceptional talents, but I would disagree with you about you following in the footsteps. While you could do that rap, you are something special, and
well, I practice every day, Janda.
Every single day.
Yeah.
All right, one last question, George, because I know you're a busy man. But I always like to ask this of people who know what they're talking about when it comes to having a music career, because there's always people out there that want to do what you do. There's always going to be, guys or girls that pick up a guitar or an instrument and have that dream of making music for people. So if you have some kind of advice that you could share with somebody who might be watching this in their bedroom right now, picking up the first a few chords of a Stone song, or trying to pick out Bad to the Bone or something like that, what would you tell them in terms of making this thing happen?
Well, here's some advice that I got from two different sources. One of them said, always play for fun, because the more fun you have playing, the better you're going to get at it. And the better you get at it, the more fun you're going to have. That was Johnny Winter said that.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Number two advice I got was someone said to me, don't let finance motivate you.
But she was right.
Because if you continue doing something where your heart and your passion is, the money will come.
Right.
But don't be driven by that.
Right.
That's a disease, and it catches up to everybody. You know,
right.
I see Tom Jones play as much as I can, and he has a look on his face like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this.
Right.
That's fantastic.
All these years later. And that's fantastic advice. And what a great end note. I'll let you get back out to being George Thorogood. And I want to say thank you so much for taking this time to speak with us. I know your fans are going to be so excited to see you September 15th at Rivers Casino in Des Plaines. And I don't have to tell you this, but keep on rocking, George.
Rock and roll never sleeps, Janda. It just passes out.
You're the best.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.